Hey guys and girls, and welcome to another episode of Kook Shed, a new YouTube channel where we discuss all things to do with bodyboarding and surfing and share tips and advice to help you have more fun out there in the water and maximise your time, get more waves, and isn't that what it's all about? So today we're talking about wetsuits, wetsuit care in particular. So the water's cooling down and you might be thinking of getting back into your wetsuit or getting a new wetsuit. So I'm going to give you a few tips today on how to care for your wetsuit and make sure that it does its job and keeps you warm out there in the water. So the first tip I would share is you need to rinse your wetsuit in fresh water when you get out of the surf. Fresh cold water. Because you're out in the surf in the salt water, when you come in you might have sand and your wetsuit's soaked in salt water. You need to rinse it off after each and every surf. You might be camping or on a road trip and you might not have access to fresh water. Sure, fair enough, but when you get home, rinse it with fresh water straight away. Try not to leave your wetsuit in the boot of the car or in the back of the car or wherever in your surf box for too long. Get it out after a surf and rinse it in fresh cold water. Not hot water. Hot water is no good for them. It may be detrimental to the seams and the glue and the stitching and things like that, and it may stop it doing its job. So you might have a bucket outside underneath a gutter that just collects a bit of fresh water. You can just rinse it in that. Make sure you rinse it thoroughly inside and out. Or you might have a shower downstairs or whatever, or a hose outside. Just make sure you rinse it thoroughly with fresh cold water. Try and get in the seams, all around the seams, things like that. The chest zips, and other ones too, I guess, the back zip ones, they'll have a flap as well around any enclosing areas, closures. So make sure you rinse in the flaps, in there, get it everywhere. Try and get in all the nooks and crannies with the fresh water, because yeah, if there's anywhere that's still sandy and salty, that's where they'll start to deteriorate, and they just don't do their job as well. So that's definitely the number one tip. Every time, try not to forget, try and make it a habit. So when you get out of the car and get your board out and everything, get your wetsuit out, give it a rinse. Now, it's my belief that the wetsuit is the most important piece of equipment in your surfing or bodyboarding setup. You can have an average board or average flipper, average leg rope or whatever, but if you've got an average wetsuit, you're not going to enjoy your time in the water, especially if it's cold, as much. So you can get by with an average board and still have fun out there, but if your wetsuit's no good, you're not going to be comfortable, you're not going to want to stay out for long. It might chafe you, it might be too tight, too big, things like that. You've got to have a good fitting, quality wetsuit, and you'll have much more time out there to enjoy the surf. So don't skimp on a wetsuit. You can skimp on something else maybe, but try and get a good wetsuit and then look after it. If you look after it, it should serve you very well for many surfs, and you'll get much more fun out there. The next tip is once you rinse your wetsuit in fresh cold water, hanging it out. So you want to hang your wetsuit out inside out. It's usually inside out from when you've taken it off anyway. So inside out in the shade. Don't hang it in direct sunlight and forget about it, because direct sunlight will actually deteriorate the neoprene rubber. It'll also damage these seals. You can see there's a seal here along the seams, and they will perish very quickly. There's many different types, but they all don't like direct sunlight for too long. So not even patchy sunlight. Just make sure it's in the shade where no sun will get on it. and your wetsuit will last much longer. The neoprene gets dry, brittle, and it's definitely not good for the suit at all. So they're the top two tips that you mustn't skip. It's rinse in fresh cold water and hang in the shade to dry, and your wetsuit should last much longer than if you weren't to do that. Also, wetsuits are designed to fit very snugly, very tightly, so they can be hard to put on and take off. My advice is to just be gentle and take it easy when you're putting on a wetsuit, especially if they're quite new. I found a brand new wetsuit that's never been wet or even really worn much will be very tight and resistant to stretching. So when you're putting it on and taking it off, it can be quite a struggle for some people. So just take it easy. I know the surf might be good and you're in a hurry to get out there, but if you just take the extra minute or two to put yourself into the wetsuit and take it off, it will last much longer, because when you put it on quickly and stretch and pull and jam yourself in there, you're putting strain on these seams, the seams and the joins here, and they don't like that at all, and you'll actually find they will pop off or pull or rip. If you've got a cut in the wetsuit from something, it will pull on that cut and will actually rip the hole bigger and bigger. So definitely take it easy getting into your wetsuit and hopping out of them. Some people use a plastic bag. You can use a plastic bag to put a wetsuit on, especially a steamer. You can put a plastic bag over your hand so that when you're putting your arm through, it just slips straight through. It works especially well on the feet. Some people struggle with steamers, the long arm, long leg wetsuits. So especially if you've got big feet, people with big feet, it can really put them through hell trying to put them on. So yeah, if you just pop a plastic bag over your foot, you'll find it will slip straight through the wetsuit leg much quicker and much more easily, and put less strain on the seams and the neoprene itself. So that's a good tip. A plastic bag, keep one in the car, and especially the thick wetsuits, once you start getting up around, the 3 by 4 millimeters or 4 by 5s, they can be really thick and hard to put on. So yeah, plastic bag will help a lot in those situations. Now, you might want to, every now and then, especially for those people who might pee in their wetsuits. Some people admit to doing it, some people don't. If you pee in your wetsuit out there, the chemicals in your pee aren't good for the wetsuit at all. So definitely, if you're a wetsuit peer, definitely make sure you rinse your wetsuit after each surf, and it may help to wash your wetsuit every now and then. This stuff is called Piss Off. It's not just for people who be in their wetsuits either. It's if you leave your wetsuit in the car, in your surf tub, or if you don't dry it out 100%, they can get quite musty and get a bit mildewy, things like that. So wetsuit wash, you'll find them in most surf shops, is a great way of cleaning the wetsuit and reviving it also. I've found that old wetsuits will, they'll get a bit, they'll lose their stretch a little bit, they'll get a bit brittle, stiff from years or seasons of getting wet in the salt water, then drying out, etc, etc. So they actually lose their suppleness that a brand new wetsuit will have. So a wetsuit wash like this one, there's a few types, it doesn't have to be this exact one, will help rejuvenate an old wetsuit as well as wash and clean a new one. So all you do is you get a couple of capfuls of this and you put it in a bucket with cold water. It says lukewarm, I think, but you don't want to have water that's too hot, because it might actually bring the seals away from the seam. So lukewarm at the most, would be preferable. You can try cold water too. I'll stick with cold, maybe a dash of warm, that's about it. So yeah, you just soak the wetsuit in a bucket with a bit of this for, it says I think 10 minutes, but I usually allow about half an hour. And you'll be surprised, it actually really not only makes your wetsuit clean and smell better, it actually rejuvenates the rubber a little. And I've had really old wetsuits that I thought it wouldn't make much difference on, and they actually became quite flexible again and supple, so it can breathe new life into an old wetsuit. So nowadays I will use wetsuit wash on all my wetsuits once a year. I'll just pick a day when I don't have much on, and I'll just run a bucket, keep topping it up with another cap full of this for each wetsuit, just do all my wetsuits. And then I've got another year of nice, supple, clean, fresh wetsuits. So that's one that I've only just started doing fairly recently, and I found it actually helps a lot. So if you get a cut in your wetsuit from, I don't know, a surfboard fin, or if you've chucked it in the car on something sharp or on your toolbox or whatever, you may have a cut that is letting in water. Or a seam might give if you haven't been looking after it properly, things like that. So you can buy wetsuit res or other, like a wetsuit repair kit at a surf shop or a dive shop, anywhere that sells wetsuits, any good place that sells wetsuits. So yeah, you usually get a kit and it'll have some proper wetsuit glue, and it will also have like a little rolled up piece of material that it's designed to cut out and put on the cut or the tear. So make sure your wetsuit's dry first. Dab a bit of this on a bit of material that they've provided. If you don't have any of that, I keep a bit of just wetsuit material laying around from other wetsuits that I've cut down. There's another video I've done on cutting down old wetsuits that you can check out also on the YouTube channel. So I've got excess neoprene from doing that, from cutting down an old wetsuit, cutting the legs off to make it into a short leg, long arm. So yeah, I've usually got a bit of old wetsuit neoprene laying around that I just cut into a shape, the shape that will cover the hole, and then I just glue it on around the hole, and then I let it set for about 48 hours. I like to, they say, you know, I think a day, but I like to go a little bit longer just to make sure it sets, because like I said, when you're putting on a wetsuit, you're putting quite a lot of strain on them, and if you've got a rip that you've just glued, it might actually damage that seal that you've just made. So allow a good amount of time when it's well and truly dry and set before taking it back in the water. And you should have a nice repaired hole in your wetsuit. Sometimes it hasn't gone all the way through, and you'll just be putting glue in a little cut and then just pressing it together. I put something on top flat, so with a bit of weight, so that it will really make that cut set. But the bad news is, generally once a wetsuit's been cut or ripped, it's my opinion that it won't ever be exactly the same again. Now, some of you out there might go, no, I've sealed my wetsuit, I've fixed it, and it's just like new. Well, if you have, good on you, but I've just found that once it's got a tear or a rip in it or a hole, even if you've repaired it, it's usually on the way out after that. And you'll start to feel a little trickle come in after a while, out in the surf. So yeah, try not to rip them, try not to leave them in a place where sharp things will land on them or rest them on a sharp thing. Like, none of that. Keep them away from pets that might chew them, rip them, tear them, that sort of thing. And like I said, getting in and out of them, be careful. When you're standing in the car park getting out of your wetsuit, I found the legs will grip when you're on the last stage, and people tend to, once they've got the wetsuit, like a steamer wetsuit, long leg one, down to their ankles, they tend to sort of just stand on the wetsuit and pull their feet up through them, try not to do that, because that puts a lot of strain, especially if you've got big feet, puts a lot of strain on the ankles and those seams there, and it can even tear the neoprene around them. So actually reach down and pull the ankle off your heel manually. Don't stand on them in the car park and pull them up, because yeah, it just puts a lot of strain on them and stops them working as good as they can. Now some of you might, if you just say you're going into a warm part of the year and you're not going to be using your steamer wetsuit anymore for a while, you might want to hang them up in your surfboard area or your surfing area or whatever, so, or in the cupboard out of the way. If you're going to hang them on a coat hanger, make sure you pick a coat hanger that's a nice broad, wide coat hanger, not a thin wire coat hanger or anything like that. Obviously make sure it's got no sharp edges on it, because a thin metal or plastic one, it just stretches out the neoprene a lot, especially because steamers are quite heavy. There's a lot of rubber in them, and if they're sitting in the cupboard or wherever for an extended period of time, hanging on a coat hanger, the coat hanger will actually put pressure on the shoulders because it's pulling down on the coat hanger. So try and get the broadest, fattest coat hanger that you can. This is a coat hanger from a surf shop. So when you go into a surf shop or a dive shop and you see the coat hangers they've got, usually they've got a big broad one because it won't damage the wetsuit as much. You can get those big wooden ones too. There's big round wooden ones. Try and choose something like that if you're going to hang them on a coat hanger, not just the thin wire ones, because yeah, they will pull on the wetsuit, and maybe if there's a shoulder seam, it will just over time, yeah, might damage them. So yeah. Alright, well, if you've got any other wetsuit tips that I've missed, it has happened before, just let me know in the comments. If you've got any tricks that might help keep your wetsuit alive a little bit longer, just let me know. I'm keen to see what you guys have come up with or found or heard from a mate. Another one that I've heard, I don't really use it much myself, is baby powder. If you've got a wetsuit that you're going to not use for a while, maybe you're going inland or the seasons change, you're not going to be wearing it until next year. Some people have found that sprinkling a little bit of baby powder on the inside of the wetsuit or on the outside will help it stay supple. Like if you haven't 100% dried out your wetsuit and then you fold it up and put it in a corner, you'll get creases in it. It might actually take the form of those folds, and it won't, when you pull it out again, it will be all crinkled and folded up. If you put a bit of baby powder on the inside of them, or even on the outside a little, it actually keeps them a little bit more supple, and it keeps them from getting moisture and mildew and rot and things like that in them. So that's another tip. I don't really use it much myself, but I've tried it once or twice, and yeah, it seems to work. So that's something else you might want to look at if you want to keep your wetsuit nice and fresh and ready for the next season when you pull it out of the cupboard. Okay guys, well that's it for another episode of Kook Shed. If you've enjoyed it, hit like, comment, whatever, and if you want to hear or see more tips and techniques to do with surfing, bodyboarding for beginners and more experienced people, just hit subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you next time on Kook Shed. Thanks for dropping in.